celebrating the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life with Sterling Fox on AM 650.
Nice to have you with us this evening as we talk about boating on this episode of Boomer Life here on AM 650. Our guests from the Boating BC Executive Board. Paul Mendham is with Navis Marine Insurance. He is a member of the board. And also with us is Tina Moberg-Parker. Tina is the Executive Director of the BC Sailing Association, a former Olympian and world champion, and also a member of Boating BC, but not the board. You've got a few other things on your plate, Tina. I'm not surprised you don't have time for all the things that they'd like you to do.
No, I like to be on the water with people wanting to learn to sail.
Let's talk about, because you mentioned already, Paul, that education is a huge component of the purpose of Boating BC. It's an industry association, but outside the industry, to the people of British Columbia, one of your primary responsibilities, as you see it, is education.
Correct.
Because an educated population will be a little safer and probably a little more inclined to, well, want to go boating and have some fun.
I think a big part of it is about having confidence. You know, people starting anything new, until you're confident, you may not want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to break down those borders. Boating is a great hobby. It's a great way to compete. There's so many different areas to enjoy a boat in British Columbia, whether it's a paddleboard, a canoe, a kayak, a sailing dinghy, a powerboat, a water ski boat,
mm-hmm.
or a yacht. There's so much opportunity in BC. There's so many places to go explore. The Broughtons, Desolation Sound, the Broken Island Group.
Mm-hmm.
We have our own Gulf Islands, which are in our backyard.
Exactly.
Boating just opens the door in British Columbia to so many aspects. But you need to be a little bit confident about going and doing it.
Absolutely.
And that's where the education piece comes in.
I can remember moving here in the early 70s from Ontario and being just so thrilled to be here. But I was terrified of the salt water, of the ocean. I came from, well, Lake Ontario is where I learned to sail or to boat, and the cottage country lakes, they're all pretty small and safe. And all of a sudden, it's the Pacific Ocean. And it's big, and it's really scary for a landlocked kid from back east. So I was lucky. I had a friend who had a sailboat who needed crew people, and so a buddy of mine and I were drafted, and we became his crew, and pretty aggressively got right at it, and on a 26-foot sloop, and we got so busy, Tina, that I didn't have time to be afraid anymore. But it is disconcerting. The ocean, for the first time, for people who didn't grow up as Paul did in West Van, or you did on the fjords of Norway. I mean, the ocean is huge and scary for a lot of people.
I think that's one reason why you would like to take a course when you get introduced to it. Take a course from a club or a school, or a learn to cruise school or a yacht club that have certified and trained people to teach you the right skills so you get comfortable right away.
And you're one of the people who teaches the teachers.
That's right. And we want to make sure that everybody gets hands-on experience right away in a comfortable and safe environment. And it doesn't matter what age you start sailing. You can start when you're 5, you can start when you're a teenager, you can start in your 20s, you can start in your 40s and your 60s and 80s. And there's courses and opportunities. There's people who learn to cruise, go on a boat for 4 days, never sailed before, and they take off with an instructor, 2 or 3 or 4 people in a boat, and they learn all the hands-on skills
mm-hmm.
for the 4 days. And they come back, and it's like, I found a new passion, and they can be in their 60s, and that's what they want to do for their retirement.
Well, and that's interesting, Paul, because, people get to that retirement threshold and go, well, gee, all of a sudden I've got all this time and perhaps a little bit of money, and gosh, whatever am I going to do with myself? Boating, though, oh gosh, well, I think I'm a little beyond boating. It's for younger people. And that's just nonsense, isn't it?
It is. I don't think there's ever a too late or too old to enjoy the waters of British Columbia,
right?
Be it salt or lake.
Mm-hmm.
We have fantastic facilities to get people out of their house and onto a boat, and that's really what I think both Tina and I believe in. And our kids, both at a young age, have learned how to sail,
right?
But that doesn't mean that's the way it has to be. There are so many different opportunities. I think Tina's just talked about the cruise and learn programs. There are people who can take the cruise and learn and then go charter a boat in the Mediterranean or go charter a boat in the Caribbean.
Right.
You can't do that without having the fundamental education in place and having certain certification done. But that opens the door up. Once you've done it here, if you've done a cruise and learn here and then you've done some chartering, even though you don't own your own boat, you've gone and cruised through the Gulf Islands, that's going to give you the foundation you need to go start looking at other places in the world to do a charter. But you need to have that foundation. You need to have that confidence.
Right. Now, Tina, I'm curious about the competitive part of sailing. You're a world-class champion. So when a kid from British Columbia decides, this sailing thing is really cool, but, I would really like to go to the Olympics. I want to be not just a water person. I want to be a medal-winning, competitive water person. Are there resources in our province for people to rise to that international competitive level?
We are so fortunate that we have some of the best clubs in the world that support their sailors. And that is from the day that the sailor wants to learn to sail. The programs are helped subsidized by the boating community. And there's funds and there's people helping out. And it's not, BC is lucky because we have a phenomenal training backyard. We don't have to be on the road the whole time. We're not like Ontario where there's ice so many months of the year.
True.
We can sail and train here, and we got a good group of young sailors that are training and pushing each other, and we got excellent coaches. And since the clubs are so very, very supportive, our sailors get to a very high level before they need to go to Europe and spend a lot of time there. At the top level, yes, it's expensive, but it is also funded through the carding system nationally and on the podium and those kind of levels.
Right, okay.
And we are doing everything we can to make sure that, we have volunteer parents driving boats places, make it inexpensive. We bill it with other families to keep the cost down, and it's cheaper than most other sports. My kids are in hockey, and that's way more expensive than sailing.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah.
I've got a couple of boys who've been through hockey as well, and that's not. But that word, expensive, a lot of people would use that perhaps as well. Yeah, I couldn't possibly. You have any idea how much those boats cost? I couldn't even. That's beyond my league. I can't play on that field. So because it can be expensive, that's the excuse not to do anything. And Paul, I think that's a little flimsy.
It is. I mean, Tina's just made the comment about how sailing as a sport compares to hockey. A lot of people, I think there's a barrier, an artificial barrier that precludes people from even thinking of sailing as a competitive sport. The yacht clubs open their doors to sailing schools all summer long. Royal Vancouver Yacht Club, West Vancouver Yacht Club, Eagle Harbor. They're all running fantastic sailing schools that are open to the public. They are not sailing schools restricted to the membership.
Right.
That doesn't happen in the golf industry, for example.
Right.
So they're breaking down these borders already at the club levels to try to get people in.
And they're providing the boats. You don't have to bring a boat with a 6-year-old to learn to sail. That's all part of the package.
Even an adults can learn to sail both on dinghies and keelboats, and the boats are provided. They take their program through a club or a school.
Right.
And then some of the schools even have it so that if you take a course, you can take out a boat very inexpensively for a day or for the weekend out of that school. And more people are owning boats together, 2 or 3 families going together to buy a boat, because you don't have, the 8-10 weeks in the summer to be able to be on a boat because you have jobs and everything else.
Sure.
And so you have it for 3 weeks, and that's reducing the cost, and it's fun, and people meet up on different bays, and you get to see different places of the province that you never had the opportunity to see in a car or anywhere else.
Well, yeah, there just aren't many yellow lines out there, are there, Paul?
There are no yellow lines.
Once you got a full tank of gas and a sense of where you want to go and a fix on what the weather's likely to be like, off you go.
Exactly.
And the funnest thing I think about sailing and cruising is that you often end up in places that you didn't plan on going, and those are the most precious places for people to see and experience. It's like when you get lost when you're going somewhere driving and you get into a tiny little village and you're like, I'm so glad I got lost.
Right, exactly.
And that's
yeah.
a little bit like sailing. If you find a new bay or a new beach or a new little island that you haven't explored before, such as in Desolation Sound, water is warm and the nature, and it's just you, and you can go for weeks without seeing anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Boaters have this great term called gunk holing, and it's the moving from location to location and exploring, and that's exactly what it's about. Finding an anchorage where no one else goes that becomes your spot. And there's so much coastline in British Columbia to be able to go do that and end up with your own little precious place. That is a big part of it. And, members of yacht clubs have great facilities they can go and outstations they can use. A lot of the members, they'll use them, but they'll still go sit on anchor somewhere and enjoy the coastline and enjoy the serenity of boating.
Right, and it's the discovery. It's the chance. We do it driving with our RVs. We deliberately go to places we've never been before, but we're kind of dependent on roads not being washed out and other details. Where as long as you got gas in your boat or you've got lots of sail, off you go.
Exactly.
A little bit of wind, and there might be, there are families that go to Desolation Sound and barely make it anywhere because they row into islands, they go fishing, the kids are hanging out, the grandparents come in their boat and anchor beside them, and it becomes a family. I have a friend of mine, her in-laws have a boat and they have a boat, and they meet up all summer long in different locations.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they go a week without seeing anybody, but there's the grandparents and then the mom and dad, and then now 2 kids.
Multiple generations.
Multiple generation, and they have something in common.
And you were talking about kids, and you, Paul, started when you were just 12, and you started much younger in Europe. But when you're teaching kids are little sponges. They just can't get enough information, especially if someone's smart enough to present the information to them in an entertaining way. Then they literally can't get enough. And you have discovered that how much little kids like to learn about the weather. And the weather, to a sailor, is a critical part of having a good time and a successful outing when you head out, isn't it?
Yeah, we start every day with talking about the weather, and I ask where the wind is coming from, and they have all kinds of ideas on where the wind is coming from, and then we get to a mutual agreement. Then we look at the clouds, we look at the waves and the current, and it only takes a few minutes, but the young kids, even as young as 6, can now predict what's going to happen. Sometimes we're wrong, but we're close enough that it's not making a difference. But, we're making those good decisions, and the kids are part of learning what the environment is looking like.
And Paul, it's that confidence that you were talking about earlier. Again, my fear of the ocean when I first started sailing in Vancouver was incredibly powerful. I was almost overwhelmed. I almost didn't go out, but of course I did. Yeah. But it's if you start at 6 or even 12 and you learn all the tide currents, the weather, cloud formations, what all that means, by the time you're 12 years old and you can go out there comfortably by yourself because you're in charge.
Exactly. We've seen it, Tina and I've seen it time and time again with young kids who are getting comfortable in the racing program. They're happy to go out sailing when it's a fine weather day.
Sure.
As soon as there's a little bit of a wave, a little bit of a chop, maybe their confidence starts to go down. Then we start to see the tears, and that's the moment Tina will lift them out of their boat and get them ashore and get them feeling good about sailing again.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go out the next time, and that next time, the bad weather can be there again, but it's not as bad. They feel a little bit more confident, and they keep going. Tina's running programs down in San Francisco on a training basis. We have 12-year-old kids sailing in 25 to 35 knots of wind in an Optimist, in a 7-foot, 7-inch sailboat, out sailing in 25 knots of wind and confidently doing it.
Wow.
And it's mostly about the good footage we get and the capsizings and the wet and the spray and the fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about the racing. It's about how much fun it is. And, just a couple of weeks ago, we were out sailing and with our beginners group, and a kid said, there's a seal. And it was a seal just 3 feet away from him.
Right.
He thought it died and gone to heaven. He was right beside a seal.
Sure.
And that's what we're about. It's seeing the environment right with us.
And on all those trips that you've described, both of you have described with friends and family, and all of a sudden, when you least expect it, bang, there's an orca.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or a pod, or a humpback,
Yeah.
or, oh my gosh, just look at that. The whole world just stops. And there you are within that incredible short distance, and there's just nature just like you couldn't believe.
There's been so much talk recently of how sound has become alive again and how the marine environment is doing well. Last summer, I was cruising into Center Bay on Gambier Island, and the water was a boil ahead of me, and I couldn't figure out what I was looking at. And I realized it was porpoises, and there was probably 100 of them all over the bay surfacing. There was kids out on paddle boards and in rowboats. They were everybody. I think the porpoises and also all of the people that were seeing this were just in awe. I mean, it was an amazing sight. Where else can you get that in the world? Literally in your backyard.
Exactly.
We're talking a location that by powerboat is 20 minutes away from West Vancouver.
Wow.
And boating and sailing is so close to nature, especially sailing. You know, there's not a sound, only the waves splashing, and it can be no wind, the sails can rattle, but it's so peaceful.
Yeah.
And that's why, you know, it doesn't matter if you start when you're 5, 20, or 60, that learning and the confidence doesn't take much to get. And then after that, it's just building on. I'm still learning, and I've been doing this for 40 years. Every day I learn something new.
Well, and isn't that fun? Isn't that the best part of it all? You just never stop learning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As long as you're willing to learn, wow, it's fun.
I want to talk. We need to take a quick break here, but when we come back, we've talked almost exclusively so far, and obviously, about sailing around here in the saltwater off the coast of the lower mainland, Vancouver Island, Howe Sound, etc. When we come back, I want to talk about stuff going on elsewhere in British Columbia, mostly, of course, freshwater stuff, but there's a surprisingly high degree of sailing going on. You think automatically lakes, water skis, powerboats. Surprise, surprise. We'll tell you more when we come back with our guests Paul Mendham and Tina Moberg-Parker from Boating BC when we return on Boomer Life.
It's all about the baby boomer lifestyle. Boomer Life on AM 650.